and people now give him credit for Doug Pederson's offense, even though Frank Reich will tell you to your face 150 times, no, that was Doug's offense. And, but for whatever reason, people spin things the way they want to spin things.
Friday on Birds 365. It's going to be a little different. Not today's show. We got two good guests coming today, so Birds 365 will be what it usually is. But, John, I don't know about you, but I'm not exactly looking forward to Sunday. We do our Friday shows leading into the weekend every week. For 22 consecutive weeks, we've had meaningful football to get ready for on Sunday. This week, it's the Pro Bowl we're getting ready for, and even though there are a bunch of Eagles there, and more power to them, I hope they have a good game, hope they have a good time. Yeah, I'm not exactly pumped up for that, but we'll cover that over the course of the show. But the number one story is Dougie P is back in the league. JM, did you see this one coming?
I did see it coming at the end. There was a big lull there. Remember, Doug Pederson was the first person interviewed for that job. And circled all the way back, and they ultimately ended up in the same space. I don't think there's any question league-wide that the Jaguars decided on Byron Leftwich. And there was sort of this crackback from his camp that they didn't want to work with Trent Baalke, and they wanted to bring in Adrian Wilson as the general manager, and he stood his ground, very similar to the Doug Pederson standing his ground with the coaching staff here. Ultimately, they couldn't come to an agreement. Now, the original talk with Doug was he didn't want to work with Trent Baalke. So the only surprise is the timing. Ultimately, I think Rick Spielman's going to be there as the sort of new football executive, whatever title they give him. And he's going to be the one sort of working hand in hand with Doug Pederson. And I think, that's very good for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know why Shad Khan is moving forward with Trent Baalke still there. I mean, Trent Baalke's still there. It's one of those situations where if you're taking his power away, why aren't you, it must be some kind of personal relationship or something of that nature. But we'll see how that part of it shakes out. The Jaguars got a lot better if they're bringing in that. We know they're bringing in Doug Pederson, but if they're bringing in Doug Pederson and Rick Spielman, they're getting a lot better, and they have the quarterback to build on the foundation. And I know Doug Pederson's excited about that, to work with Trevor Lawrence. So happy for Doug Pederson. It's going to be interesting from a Philadelphia perspective. To see, and the Jaguars come and visit the Eagles this year at Lincoln Financial Field. But think about the AFC South, Jody. I mean, you're going to have Doug Pederson and Frank Reich twice a year. Well, who knows if Carson Wentz is there? You might have Jonathan Gannon in Houston. He's a finalist there. They're going to have to make a decision too. The AFC South could be getting a lot of television time in the Philadelphia area.
Right. Could be Philadelphia in the South, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about the Jaguars. You mentioned the Rick Spielman hire as well. Do we know yet that Trent Baalke is just going to be a figurehead? Do we not know that Trent Baalke is going to be the guy who Rick Spielman is going to report directly to? We don't have a clue yet as to what the power.
Well, they haven't made the hire yet, but the scuttlebutt around the league is Spielman's going to report only to Shad Khan, so he's going to be the one in charge. And ultimately, if he's not going to go there. I mean, he's not going to go there for a position behind Trent Baalke. So you'll know relatively quickly if he's there. He's going to be in charge of the football operations. And I would assume that's what Doug Pederson wants, based on the fact that he didn't want to work with Trent Baalke in the first place. So I'm guessing at this point that's going to be the end game of this particular sort of shuffling of the deck chairs in Jacksonville. And then from the Jaguars' perspective, you have to ask the question, well, if you wanted Byron Leftwich, why didn't you just hire the guy he wanted to be the GM? So, I mean, those are questions Shad Khan's going to have to answer.
All right, we'll take another step down this road. I like Byron Leftwich. I think he did a hell of a job last year working with Brady, working with Arians, the triumvirate of those three, running that Tampa Bay offense all the way to a Super Bowl title and another pretty good lengthy run in the playoffs this year. He's still relatively young. He has not had head coaching experience. Did he have the gravitas to say, oh, yeah, I'll take your job, but only if you use my hand-picked guy as the general manager? We're dealing with all this talk about whether interviews for the Rooney Rule are actually being given a realistic chance to get the job, or is it just them fulfilling obligation to take interviews? And a guy like Leftwich becomes the favorite to get a job. And he comes in having never coached before with the stance of, well, if you bring my guy in as the general manager too, well, then, yeah, I'll sign on the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's pretty presumptive if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it from both ways. What you just said, I get. Yeah, I mean, the guy's a 42-year-old guy. He's unproven in this league as a head coach. He's getting an opportunity to be a head coach, and you're making demands. That's not necessarily a good look. On the other hand, I see it from his perspective in that, look, he doesn't trust the guy, Trent Baalke, and he's not the only one. He's got a bad reputation around the league. So you got to look at Shad Khan. And he's saying to himself, probably, you only get one shot at this, especially as an African-American in the history of this league. So if you go in there and stink up the joint because the GM is undercutting you and not doing what you want, is not working together, that's probably it. I mean, you'll get another job as a coordinator, but if your ultimate goal is to be a head coach, I get it from that perspective as well. You get one opportunity, you want to hit the home run, and you want to set everything up as best as possible. So if you do fail, you can look in the mirror and say, well, at least I failed doing the way I wanted to do it. So I kind of see it from both ends of the spectrum. But there's no doubt we're in a different generation where people expect more. I mean, in an older generation, if you got a job, you'd be thankful and you say, okay, I'll try to make the best of it. This is a little bit different now. People want, we look at it in Ben Simmons. I hate to bring up Ben all the time, but he doesn't even want criticism, and he wants people to go to his house, even if he doesn't answer their text message, and love him up. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just where you are. And as an executive, and we'll talk to Randy Mueller, it's something you got to deal with. Do you want the guy? But I will say, if I'm Shad Khan, that's probably what I would have said. I would have said, well, screw you. I'm going to go get somebody else.
I'm giving you the job, and you're going to dictate another hire. I'm hiring you, and you want to dictate another hire? Like I said, pretty damn presumptive.
But then again, he's going to hire somebody else for Doug. So I'm very confident in that.
But do you have any information that Doug suggested Rick Spielman was the guy? As far as I know, there's no crossover between those two guys. How does that?
No, but here's one of the things, and one thing I'm very interested of. I think it was our buddy Mike Garafolo first reported it a couple weeks ago, that Rick was close to getting a job and he wanted to bring in Doug as the head coach in Jacksonville. That's where it first started. So I believe Mike was the first who reported it. So I'll give him credit for that. One of the things I always laughed at the Eagles for, and I still do it, I laughed at everybody that believes it. And I said on this show, when the Eagles spun that Doug Pederson with his coaching staff and didn't know anybody and didn't have any connections. I mean, the guy played in the league for 13 years. The guy knows Rick Spielman. They're friends. They've grown to know each other from other avenues. This presumption that you don't know anybody if you didn't coach with them is absurd. I mean, the first whisper of his defensive coordinator is Jim Caldwell, who wasn't one of his coaches, but he was with the Eagles And you learn, again, he had a 13-year playing career. He knows people. He knows everybody in this league. It's always been one of those dumb spins. And look, I get it. You're trying to make your decision look the best as humanly possible. And I don't even blame the Eagles for it. I blame the people who bought it hook, line, and sinker, that this guy doesn't know anybody in the NFL. He knows everybody in the freaking NFL.
Which I think was actually pretty funny because you've reported this. The other guys in Eagle Beat have reported this. It's never been stated on the record by either of the two parties, the Eagles and or Doug Pederson, but I think you guys are right. A big breaking point between Doug and the Eagles was Doug's desire to have more say over his very own staff. So they want to mock the guy because he didn't know anybody. We came in and took over a coach. He doesn't have good enough contacts. He's not feeling strongly enough about his staff. Then when he finally gets some nerve and says, here's what I want out of my staff, you go, oh, well, you don't get to dictate your staff. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't say the guy didn't make enough contacts as he was coming through the league. And then when he really gets strong about who he wants to work with and have on his staff, then you bounce him out the door. That's just stone cold ridiculous.
Yeah, and I thought it was always an easy decision. I think if I were in that room and was Jeffrey Lurie, I would say, okay, I don't agree with it. Press Taylor's been sort of the lightning rod that people started making fun of, and I've told that story. I think it's ironic. Doug Pederson didn't hire Press Taylor.
Right,
Press Taylor was here in the organization. The organization loved Press Taylor. The organization thought he was a young, quickly rising coach with a lot of upside. You even go back to the Super Bowl season. You remember they made it very clear who came up with the Philly special. That was Press Taylor, who mined it from an old Minnesota-Chicago game. Chicago ran it on a 2-point conversion. It succeeded. That's where he found it. They put it in. They had it in. They use it in the biggest moment, the Super Bowl. He's a rising star, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, and by the way, there are plenty of things to criticize Press Taylor for. I thought he was way too close, personally, with Carson Wentz. I didn't think he was willing to be his boss. He was more of his friend. So it's not that I don't think you can criticize Press Taylor, but he was a rising star in the organization right up until Doug Pederson took an interest in him, and then he was an idiot. And by the way, Frank Reich hired him right away, who was loved and beloved in this city, and people now give him credit for Doug Pederson's offense, even though Frank Reich will tell you to your face 150 times, no, that was Doug's offense. And but for whatever reason, people spin things the way they want to spin things. And we'll see. I mean, those are the first two names floated out there: Press Taylor, Jim Caldwell, to be on his coaching staff. It's going to be interesting because I'll tell you this, Jody. I don't know what's today's date. I don't even know.
Today would be the 4th. Today would be the 4-year anniversary of the Super Bowl winning victory over the New England Patriots. For the
February 4th. Okay, so we got a long way to go till September. We don't even know what the schedule is, but we do know the Jacksonville Jaguars are coming here to play the Philadelphia Eagles. And right. My advice to Nick Sirianni is win that game. Do anything to win that game.
That's kind of a key one. Yeah, that's a circle it as soon as the schedule comes out type game. How do you think, and there'll be a handful of guys left on this Eagle roster by the time 2022 rolls around who are also on the 2017 Super Bowl winning roster. It will be just a handful because that's what happens in the National Football League. Father Time wins and players move on and teams move on, but there'll be a couple of guys left. How do they handle? They go over and do the bro hug thing in warm-ups. Is there anything that is actually something that the Eagle fans can see a reaction to Doug P from his former players? How do you think it plays out on that day, whatever that day may be, that we won't find out about when it is till April?
Yeah, I mean, I think people will be happy to see Doug, and certainly his players loved him. I mean, there'll be no issues from that perspective. I think even the organization will be very gracious and thank him for coming back. I think the fans will be as well for the most part. But once kickoff starts, they're going to want to win that game. They're going to want to prove they were right. Maybe they were right. I don't know. It's just going to be interesting. It is good for the Eagles. He's in the other conference, and you're not going to see him that often. It just happens to work out. You're going to see him this year. Um, but it is going to be interesting to watch it from afar and to see, because that is a bad organization. And if he can turn that organization around, well, there's no more whispers about Doug Pederson. I think there was too much, and a lot of this is human nature, and that Jeffrey and Howie wanted credit for the Super Bowl, and Doug got more of the credit because he's the head coach. And I think there was a little twinge of jealousy that started all this, and it ended where it ended. It shouldn't have ended. Doug should have been given. I've said it 100 times. I still believe it. He should have been given another year. Then if he fails, then fire him. Fine, with his guys. And he wanted Press Taylor to be the offensive coordinator, Matt Burke to be the defensive coordinator. And if he couldn't get Matt Burke, it was going to be Corey Unlin. And people snicker at that. Fine. Then if he fails, he fails. But he earned the right to pick who he wanted to pick on his coaching staff.
That was an opinion that was shared by many when the divorce happened between Doug Pederson and the Eagles. They ended up with Nick Sirianni. At least they seem to have landed on their feet with their replacement choice. But good for Doug Pederson in that he's getting a job just 1 year out, which, oh, by the way, he cashed Eagle checks all throughout this year because he had time to go left on his contract. So we didn't have to come up with a GoFundMe page for Dougie P. He got to get out, play some golf, and enjoy his life and go watch his son play. But he's right back in the mix after only 1 year, which is not a bad thing. Some guys wait a lot longer than that. Some get lucky and turn around and get a job right away. Doug was hurt by the fact that the Eagles waited a week before they decided they were going to move on from him. And usually the chopping block comes as soon as the season is over and done with. The Monday thereafter, the Tuesday thereafter. Doug didn't get his walking papers till a week later, so that compromised his possibility of getting a job last year. Well, a year later, he is back in the NFL as a head coach. And yes, I think a lot of Philadelphia fans will be pulling in part for the Jaguars next year, except for that 1 week when the Jaguars are coming to Philadelphia to actually take on the Eagles. All right, that is just one of many topics we will hit on today. We've got two good guests that are scheduled to join us. It's a football Friday. Yeah, it's only the Pro Bowl on Sunday, but a Senior Bowl with guys that are going to eventually play in the league you can watch on Saturday. So you actually got football both days, but it is not a true NFL weekend of action. But we'll make the most of it just the same and try and stick to our routine. Ed Game Day Cracks is going to hop aboard. He's certainly got some insight to Doug Pederson getting the job down in Jacksonville and his time here in Philadelphia. So we'll get Eddie Kratz up early. In our second hour, Randy Mueller, ex-executive of the year in the National Football League, former general manager, Dolphins and Saints. He's going to hop aboard with us, certainly with the NFL's going through this week with the Brian Flores lawsuit. We want to talk to him about the Super Bowl as well. So we've got several good topics we can touch on with Randy Mueller, who will join us in hour number 2. But it's the MAGA Mac guys, John McMullen, Jody McDonald here with you on Birds 365.